Hi there, I'm Roger Johnson. It is April 7th, 2018. I'm in Marceline, Missouri, the boyhood hometown of Walt Disney. Walt Disney was not born here in Marceline. He was actually born in Chicago. Just a couple of weeks ago, I stopped by the home where he was born. It's not a museum or anything yet. It's undergoing restoration. I'm not sure exactly what they're going to do with it. As a boy, the family moved out here to Marceline to this very property that I'm on right now. The house is just up the way here. I'm looking at it right now. It's a private residence. Don't go knocking on the door or ringing the doorbell. Leave them alone. They are very kind in letting people come to the back part of the property here. To see the barn. This is a reproduction of the barn that was here when Walt Disney was a boy. This was his happy place. He got to go and play here and explore and be a kid, and it is so cool that it is here that you can go see it. Just up the trail here is the dreaming tree, or the son of the dreaming tree, excuse me, the original dreaming tree, the great big tree that Walt would look up at and dream big dreams. It blew down a number of years ago, but this is a descendant tree of that original tree. Very cool. If you go downtown, you can walk Main Street USA, the actual Main Street that inspired Walt Disney's Main Street USA at Disneyland. I just had lunch there, a little place on the corner. And then they've got a museum. It is the neatest thing ever. The old train depot is now a Walt Disney hometown museum. It's perfect that is where the museum ended up, because Walt Disney, as he was a boy, as an adult, he absolutely loved trains, and so for that museum to be housed at the train depot, that's really cool. The museum is excellent. So anyway, back to my story. Walt Disney went on to war. He served as an ambulance driver during World War I. I don't know if there's any specific historic sites or anything relating to Walt Disney's service in World War I. But if you really want to learn about World War I, go to Kansas City. It's not terribly far from here. Visit the National World War I Museum. And part of the reason that I mention it is, it's certainly linked to World War I, but just about a mile away, I would say, not very far away, is the site of Walt Disney's first studio, the Laugh-O-Gram Studios. The building is undergoing renovations, I guess. It's a little run down right now. I was there this morning, but they're going to restore it. This is where Walt Disney started his career as a filmmaker. He produced the Alice comedies there. The Alice comedies were a series of films starring a little girl set in a cartoon world. And if you remember Mary Poppins, the scene where they jump into the chalk drawing and they're in the cartoon world, it was like that, but only black and white and not quite as advanced as Mary Poppins certainly was. Yeah, of course, ended up going out to Los Angeles and lived out there for the rest of his life. He had two different homes in Los Angeles. One of them is still there. There's not much to look at from the street. You can drive by and, yeah, okay. Oh yeah, Walt Disney lived there. The other home on Carrollwood Avenue, nothing to see, literally. The house is not there anymore. There's apparently a big mansion in its place. You can't even see that. There's just like these giant 40-foot tall hedges on either side of the road and security cameras and giant gates and things. Don't even bother. But if you do want to bother, the place to go, in Walt's yard, he had toy trains. I'm not talking little HO or even O-scale Lionel trains. He had trains that were big enough that you could actually ride on. Steam-powered locomotives that would tow you around the yard, front yard, backyard, through tunnels, underneath the rose bushes, the whole deal. And in order to play with his trains and maintain his trains, he had a shed, a barn, almost, I think it's probably identical to this. It's its twin. This is, of course, based on the one that he had growing up. That one was based on the one growing up. When Walt Disney passed away, the barn went to the Los Angeles Live Steamers, a group of railroad enthusiasts. They have set up in Griffith Park trains, not Walt's original trains, but very much like Walt Disney's trains that you can ride on and you can go around the thing. They are open on a very limited schedule. Every Sunday of the month you can ride on the trains. Every third Sunday of the month really limited schedule is you can go and visit Walt's actual barn, the structure that he had in his backyard. I didn't get to do that. I was there on the first Sunday of the month, and you got to go the third Sunday of the month. But I did get to see it as I went by on the train track. Oh. Anyway, Walt Disney's love of trains was one of the catalysts for actually building Disneyland. He wanted a place to have bigger trains and be able to share it with people. There is a reason that when you enter Disneyland, you go underneath the railroad tracks next to the train depot. There is a reason that a railroad train track runs around the entire perimeter of Disneyland. Walt Disney loved trains. I got to go to Disneyland, and it really is the happiest place on earth. It's not just a slogan. When Walt Disney was building the park, there were no hotels around. There was nothing but orange groves, and he needed a place to stay. It was a little bit of a drive from Los Angeles in his home or the studios in Burbank. So he wanted to be there while it was being constructed. From the time they finished planning it until it opened, it was only a year. So they really threw that thing together quick. And so Walt had them build for him an apartment right above the fire station. If you're at the town square and you're looking at the city hall, just to the right is the fire depot, and you can go in there and there's neat old fire equipment. You can ride the fire truck up and down Main Street. That's really cool. Right above there is Walt Disney's apartment, and he was there when it was under construction. The park was under construction, and then once the park opened, he would come and he would stay there. And the cast members, the employees at Disneyland, would know that Walt Disney was around when they looked up at the windows in the firehouse, and they saw that the lights were on. When Walt Disney passed away, he wasn't physically there anymore, but his spirit certainly was. His legacy was still there. So ever since then, they have a lamp, and they set it in the window of the fire station, and that stays on, and you can look up and you can see that lamp and remember that Walt Disney is still very much there. Disneyland was the only theme park, Disney theme park, that Walt Disney ever actually experienced. And because of that, they offer at Disneyland the Walk in Walt's Disneyland Footsteps Tour. So I took the tour. That's the button that they gave me at the beginning of the tour, and then at the end of the tour they give you a little bit, a pin. This opens up. This is really nice. And I'm not a pin collector. I'm more into patches. But inside there is the dedication that Walt read for Disneyland.
To all who come to this happy place, welcome. Disneyland is your land. Here age relives fond memories of the past.
It's a 3-hour walking tour of the park, and as you go, they make various stops and tell you various stories about who Walt Disney was and how it relates directly to Disneyland. My tour guide for the afternoon was Catherine. She was everything that you would have expected from a Disneyland cast member in that type of a role. If she had been carrying an umbrella instead of a riding crop, I would have thought that Mary Poppins herself was leading the tour. She was practically perfect in every way. About halfway through the tour, the group stopped in Adventureland to take a little break, and the conversation turned to the Disney Family Museum up in San Francisco. I have not been there before. Catherine had, and she was telling me all about it. She could not say enough nice things about the Disney Family Museum, and it was cool to see because she went from just really good tour guide to someone that was genuine and passionate about Walt Disney and his life and his story. And then later on, as we're walking down Main Street, USA, she was genuinely interested in my story. Why was I at Disneyland? Why was I taking the tour? And then she wanted to know about all of these Disney sites and attractions that I wanted to see. And so it was really a treat. Her genuine interest, genuine enthusiasm, and her sincerity made a great tour into something that was truly magical. And that wasn't even the best part of the tour. The best part of the tour is at the very end you get to go into Walt Disney's apartment above the firehouse. And that was that was neat. Not too many people get to go up there, and it's a small room, a very intimate space, a very personal space. This was Walt Disney's home away from home, and it's clear doing all this stuff. Walt Disney may have left Marceline. I don't think Marceline ever left Walt Disney. Even though he had great success in following and pursuing all of his dreams, I think he was still a genuine, down-to-earth guy. And you hear these stories standing in this apartment, and this is the window where on opening day of Disneyland he looked out and he saw all the people, and a tear came down his cheek. Over here, this is the hot plate. He would make grilled cheese sandwiches, and then he'd take a can of chili and eat it straight out of the can. That's a real guy. It's a real person, and to be in that space and hear those stories was a real treat. So Walt Disney always wanted to be remembered as a storyteller, and I think that is primarily how he is remembered. If you go down to the Hollywood Walk of Fame, there are 2 stars for Walt Disney. One is dedicated to his work in television, and the other one film. And he did a lot of that work primarily, of course, at the studios, the one in Kansas City, as well as Los Angeles. I went by the Hyperion Avenue studio site. It's not there anymore. It's just a grocery store. I went and bought some groceries just so that I could park there and take some pictures. But this was where he did the Oswald the Lucky Rabbit cartoons. He did Mickey Mouse cartoons, including Steamboat Willie, the very first sync sound cartoon, and the very first feature-length animated film, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. Snow White was a huge, huge success, and that brought in some money into the studio that I don't think they were used to having. Walt and his brother Roy was more of the business partner than when Walt was more the creative guy. They decided the studio is too small. Let's invest the money that we're earning off of Snow White into a new studio. So they bought land out in Burbank and built a new studio. That's a studio that's still in use today. They don't offer tours like a lot of the other studios do. I went and I just walked around the outside. It's kind of neat to look in. Across the street from the studio, Buena Vista Street is the hospital that Walt Disney, he checked himself in to have an old polo injury looked at, and while they were investigating that, they discovered that he had a tumor. He had lung cancer, and it was not too terribly long after that Walt Disney passed away, December of 1966. He was cremated and his ashes were scattered. You don't have to visit a cemetery or a gravesite to understand the legacy of Walt Disney. You can find it in the museums, in his movies, at the theme parks, and in the people who work there. I don't think it's necessary to have known Walt Disney to get to know Walt Disney. From Marceline, Missouri, the boyhood hometown of Walter Elias Disney, I'm Roger Johnson.